Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy BDELL. If you're new to the channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. But today I'm going to be breaking down the occultic knowledge of the formation of the European myths and legends that's applied to paganistic, hedonistic concepts that's interconnected to Halloween and the metaphysical information behind it. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get straight to it because we finna go into the dark side. Right? So get your popcorn for this one, because we're going to break down all the occultic information that's basically interconnected with the political infrastructure, with westernized culture, Canaanite culture. We're going to be talking about the black nobility. We're going to be talking about the archonic forces, leprechauns, ghouls, goblins, and all this stuff, and how it basically is connected to ancient history, ancient occultic information that was basically hidden from the public, right? So one thing that people got to understand about Halloween is really called a ritualistic event that's called the Samhain. The Samhain event is basically a ritualistic thing that takes place on October 31st that basically sets the negative tone and frequency for the political infrastructure when you're talking about the elections, right? We finna get into it today. So with that being said, now, when you go to Dr. York's publication, right, it's basically giving you the occultic history of where Halloween came from, right? Because Halloween basically came from the Celts. The Celts are the Druids, and the Druids are basically the Canaanites, and the Canaanites, according to Leviticus chapter 14:33, they are the cursed ones that propagates the hedonistic concepts that's acclimated to the westernized infrastructure when you're talking about America and Europe and things of that nature. So when you go to the etymological roots of the word druid, it means knowing of an oak tree, right? And the druids are basically the ones that facilitated the practices of religion, because religion is basically a form of witchcraft, right? Which is basically watered down Satanism. The religion is basically interconnected to the dark priesthood of the Druids that came from Canaanite culture. Because when you go through all throughout the monotheistic text, it talks about how the Canaanites are actually the cursed seed. And the cursed seed did these ritualistic sacrifices during the time of Halloween, which is called Samhain, right? We finna get into that. So the Celts are the Druids are the Canaanites, and the Canaanites are basically black nobility or whatever you want to call them, right? We finna get straight to it because Halloween is a ritualistic, sacrificial event that basically applies to everything that's connected to as far as like the elections, because all this stuff that's taking place right now, I'm going to show you a satanic calendar that's basically in alignment to everything that I'm basically talking about right now. So these are basically old pictures from the old costumes that they used to wear. But and the reason the great majority of these hedonistic activities that's connected to pagan worship and things of that nature that came from the Amorites and the Canaanites, which is basically comprised of the same bloodline, what they used to do is they used to put these masks on and they used to hunt down the indigenous witches, right? We finna get into that as we get through the presentation. I don't want to spoil everything for you. So these are the masks, the first mask. So mask is a way to hide your shadow self. It's a way to hide your negative frequency of your shadow self to bring about a spirit that basically puts you in alignment to live out certain things in the physical form. That's another reason why they used to wear the mask during the rituals or during the time when they did, like, you know, the KKK, when they put the hoods over their head. When you hide your face, you're basically hiding your hand, basically. We finna get into that as well. So, as I was telling you before, when you break down the etymological roots of the word Salem, like the witches of Salem, the Salem witch trials, Salem is equated to the word Salim, which means peace. And the people who were a peaceful people were the indigenous people. So the witches of Salem or the witches of Salim are actually indigenous women that was in that geographical area when you're talking about North Carolina and South Carolina, right? So they used to put these masks on to hunt down these indigenous black women who was practicing a metaphysical art of alchemy, and they thought that was witchcraft. And once they caught them, they used to hang them. So all this is interconnected to the KKK. Is interconnected to the black dark science of, you know, racism, right? So now, when we also go to Dr. York's publication, it talks about how the Druids, the Celts, the Canaanites had gruesome human sacrifices of the Celts that were performed only to promote fertility and to appease, thank, gain help, and deities, often prisoners of wars, thieves, murderers, sacrifice. However, innocent wives, children were also. So this is basically, that was basically giving you a list of all the people that they was basically sacrificing to give them this autonomous form of power, basically, right? So October 31st was the most important day for the Celts. It was basically their New Year's, and it's called the Samhain, Lord of the Dead. And when you get down to the inception points of the etymological roots of the word Sam, Sam is equated to Samael or Samuel, which is another nomenclature title for Baal or Saul. Baal and Saul are basically Ibiblis. Ibiblis is connected to the factions of the dark priesthood of the Luciferian Anunnaki, right? Because his father raped his way into the bloodline when you're talking about Malita. We finna get into this. All this is all connected to your Anunnaki stuff, your cherubim and your seraphim, extraterrestrials. All this stuff is basically working in symbiotic connection, right? So all the synchronicities that you need comes from this holiday, right? So one thing, like I said, the Druids are basically Celts. Celts are basically Canaanites, and the Canaanites are basically the warlocks of racism when you fast forward up into covert racism in modern day times that we're living in right now, right? Because as you can see right here, this wizard is basically a personification of a grand wizard, right? Because the Celtics or the Druids, they used to practice necromancy, right? So now when you go to Dr. York's publication, and according to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 through 12, it talks about how Baal, the sun god, who was actually Saul, as I was telling you. So the Amorite were under the rule of Nimrod, the Nubian ruler of Babylon, and the self-proclaimed ruler of the Amorite. He was counseled by the Merlin, the magician, who was the physical manifestation of the evil one, who was Baal or Salim, right? You got to understand the nomenclature titles according to the mythology. So this individual that you see right here, you see the crescent moon and the star on his wizard cap, right? Which is basically in alignment to the KKK, because as I was telling you before, westernized racism is a form of witchcraft. All forms of racism is a form of witchcraft, because you're basically extracting a power from a certain demographic of people in the name of capitalism. Whether if you capitalizing off them metaphysically, spiritually, economically, all these things work in tandem. Now, this applies to the KKK, as I was telling y'all. Now, a Grand Wizard, right? The head honcho in the KKK is called the Grand Wizard. The Grand Wizard is sometimes called the Imperial Wizard or the National. director of the KKK, right? And the first Klan was founded in 1865. Then also, when you get down to the 1915, it talks about the imperial wizards. The national officers were styled imperial officers. State or realm officers were styled grand officers. For example, a grand dragon was the highest ranking clansman in a given state. Notice you see the word grand dragon, because one thing you got to understand about Celtic culture, Druid culture, it's all connected to the Canaanite. So the Canaanite, as far as the ancient sigil system, they used to propagate their sigils of a dragon to let them know what factions that they were basically working with when you're talking about the cherubim or the fallen ones or the draconian reptilians. We finna get into that as we get through the presentation. Now, a wizard, a man who has magical powers, especially in legends and fairy tales. A sorcerer, a warlock, a male witch, necromancer, black magician, occultist, right? So when you see people within the factions of the political infrastructure that works in tandem with racism, you have a lot of people who have political seats in office and city council members or whatever. A lot of these people are actually connected to the KKK and they grand wizards, and they're also connected to the Freemasonic order. So when you call yourself a grand wizard, you're calling yourself a witch. So that's how you know that the whole infrastructure of westernized culture is based on dark black magic, witchcraft. Racism is witchcraft, right? That is their power. And you can see it, how witchcraft is also working in tandem with Christianity by way of the Inquisition, because the Christian organization is also interconnected to the KKK, because the KKK is a Christianized organization, which is why they used to push the politics of fear, right? Which, because we all know when it comes to the political infrastructure, the Republican Party was started by the indigenous people. And then when you fast forward into the 1700s and 1800s and things of that nature, the Republican Party in itself was started by 150 blacks and 20 Europeans, right? So they used to put these garments on, and if you look at the garments and the sigil system of it, it looks like a Santa Claus outfit, and you also see the crescent moon and the star that's also acclimated to the sigil system of the Nation of Islam, right? We finna get into it. So the great majority of these factions of the negative factions of the political infrastructure, when you're talking about racism, they used to put these garments on and they used to hunt down so-called black people in order to get them to vote for the Democratic Party, because the KKK is also interconnected to the Democratic Party, right? So the Grand Wizard, right? The head honcho, the imperialist, which is why the great majority of westernized infrastructure is based on imperialism. So all this stuff that you see right now are basically forms of ritualistic witchcraft, right? And it also plays a part when you're talking about making pacts with the devil, right? When you understand their sigil system. So this is another part of the publication I was telling you about. So it talks about how these sacrificial events on these certain dates that basically takes place. You notice you see November 4th right here, right? Which is also P. Diddy's birthday. These are the satanic revels when they do sacrifices. And these sacrifices is being used to weaponize to break down the root chakra. Because when you break down the root chakra, it basically opens up interdimensional portals for entities, non-corporeal entities, to take up on the vessel of certain individuals, or these entities can come through your root chakra, which is basically a portal in order for them to get to the physical realm, basically. So you got November 1st, right? Which is also connected to Halloween. So all the stuff that you see in right now, as far as like the satanic revels, these equinox events or whatever, all this stuff is basically setting a tone for the election, right? So, like I said, it's basically interconnected to the political plot, that's connected to the Inquisition. Because now, when you go to this part of the publication, it talks about the magic and the sorcery tools of evil, right? So you notice you see different forms of necromancy and magic. You got white magic, gray magic, black magic, red magic, uh, innovative magic, and then you have contagious magic, uh, sympathetic magic. But we're going to pay attention to the red magic because the red magic basically invokes the evil one himself, which is why you see red during the time of these sacrificial events. I'm not sure if anybody's in the chat, they seen my breakdown talking about P. Diddy, because if you notice, P. Diddy, he was basically a Luciferian priest. And at all his parties, everybody else will wear white and he be the only one that's wearing red. So there's a synchronicity there when you're talking about these red ritualistic events that's connected to necromancy, that's connected to the paganistic holidays of Halloween and these freak off parties. Notice you see him wearing red. He is the grand wizard, the imperialist, right? Same thing applies because what you're seeing taking place, these are basically pacts with the devil. These are blood rituals. Just because you don't see blood doesn't mean that it's not a blood ritual. Don't ever forget that, because it's a form of energy extraction. Because the more you leak out energy, it's basically the same thing as you slitting your throat, and you know what comes after that. So red magic is part of the evocations of the pacts with the devil, right? Black magic and pacts, the sigil connected to the magical grimoire, which is a runic magic. All this stuff is applied to it, right? Now, before we get into this, I'm going to show you a video, or I might just give you a brief rundown, and then we get into this. Because all this stuff, as far as like, the Celtic people, as I was telling you before, the Celts in Ireland were basically the Druids. The Druids are Amorites. Amorites are Canaanites, which is basically the cursed seed. These are the ones where you get your garments for the KKK. Because, like I said, they were basically wizards. When you look at my cursor right here, this is what the Druids used to look like before the Canaanites, or before the KKK came into play in 1865. When you look at my cursor, this is what they used to look like, right? A wizard is a warlock. A warlock is a warlock of racism. So now you can see, beyond the illusion of everything that's, taking place on a perceptual level when it comes to westernized culture. Now, what I was basically showing you, the Celts, the Druids, the warlocks during the time of ancient times, they used to war against the green people. The green people were basically the children of Woolpit and basically the leprechauns. And they were basically lacking a genetical enzyme of digestion that basically put a constant concentration on the melanin to the point where their physiology started to turn green. So this is why a lot of times, like when you see the people who come from inner earth or these subterranean kingdoms, when you talking about Shambhala or in Argartha, they were basically coming from the caverns of the earth, basically, right? And they used to come to the surface and they used to war with the Celtics, the Druids, which are basically your warlocks, which is basically the inception point of your KKK. They used to war with these beings right here. They were basically melanated, right? Where you get your term leprechaun and things of that nature. We finna get into it. But first, I'm finna show you this video before we get into the rest of the presentation.
Imagine a village where two children appeared out of nowhere. This is the story of the children of Woolpit. In the quaint village of Woolpit, nestled amidst the rolling hills, an unusual event unfolded that would forever mark its history. Two young children, as green as fresh spring leaves, appeared as if conjured by some unseen force. Their clothes, unlike any seen before, hinted at a foreign origin. Their language, a symphony of unknown sounds, added another layer to their mystery. The villagers, at first startled, soon extended a hand of kindness. Fear and confusion gave way to curiosity and compassion. The children spun tales of a green-hued land where the sun remained hidden, leaving the villagers in awe. Their peculiarities, once a source of fear, became threads weaving them into the fabric of Woolpit. The villagers named them the Children of Woolpit. Their mysterious origin became a beloved part of Woolpit's folklore. As the children grew, they adapted to their new life in Woolpit. Their transformation was nothing short of remarkable. The children, once strangers, now spoke the village's language with ease, their tongues rolling over the familiar rhythms and tones. They learned the villagers' customs, their ways of life, and soon they were no longer outsiders, but part of the community. The children spoke of their homeland, a green-hued land where the sun never shone. Their stories were as captivating as they were strange. The villagers hung on to their every word, their minds filled with images of this mystical place. It was as if a curtain had been lifted, revealing a world beyond their own. But this tale of adaptation and integration took a tragic turn. One day the children fell ill. A sickness, cruel and relentless, swept through their young bodies. The villagers watched helplessly as the children's vitality faded away, their once bright eyes dimming. The boy left them first, his soul departing for that green-hued land he so often spoke of. The girl, not long after, followed her brother into the eternal unknown. The villagers mourned their loss, and their memory lived on as a cautionary tale of the dangers of the unknown. Their tale, filled with mystery and sorrow, served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present shadow of the unexplored. It was a story that would echo through the generations, a testament to the enduring spirit of the children of Woolpit. The children's story became a legend, passed down from generation to generation. The tale of the green-hued children of Woolpit quickly spread beyond the confines of the village, capturing the imaginations of people near and far. The story of these mysterious children, appearing as if out of thin air, speaking a language unknown, and recounting tales of a sunless green-hued land, sparked fascination and intrigue. This legend, so rooted in mystery, has given birth to various interpretations. Some see the children as lost travelers from a distant land, while others lean towards the supernatural, considering them beings from another realm. Yet regardless of the differing viewpoints, the children of Woolpit have undeniably etched themselves into the consciousness of many. Their story has served as a wellspring of inspiration across diverse artistic domains. From literature to music, from painting to sculpture, the enigmatic children of Woolpit have found their way into countless creative expressions. Their tale has transcended the barriers of time and space, evolving, adapting, and continuing to resonate through the ages. Beyond its influence on the arts, the legend of the children of Woolpit has also kindled a profound interest in the study of folklore and mythology. Researchers and scholars have delved deep into this tale, seeking to unravel the threads of its origin and meaning. Some propose that the children's strange appearance and behavior could be tied to a rare genetic condition. Others perceive it as a metaphorical narrative, encapsulating the clash of cultures and the challenges inherent in integration. Regardless of the interpretation, the story of the children of Woolpit remains a powerful and enduring part of the village's cultural heritage. It is a testament to the human spirit's adaptability, a reminder of the kindness and hospitality extended to the unknown, and a symbol of the tantalizing allure of the unexplored. It continues to inspire people all over the world, reminding us of the power of storytelling and the importance of understanding and embracing the unknown. And so the legend endures, its essence undiminished, its impact unfading.
So one thing you also got to understand is about the geographical area of where the children of Woolpit came from, because they're basically in between the Netherlands and Ireland. That's where Woolpit is basically at, right? Now, as I was telling you before, the reason that the great majority of the children of Woolpit, they were basically turning green is because they were basically lacking a genetical enzyme of digestion that basically put a concentration on the melanin to where it basically became green. Now, one thing you got to understand, that's basically applied to Osiris when you go into Kemetic spirituality, because Osiris, he was basically green, his physiology. And you also cannot negate the fact that a lot of highly melanated children, when they're born, they have Mongolian spots. That's the green spots that you see all over your genetical structure when you come out your mom's womb. So this is what we were basically talking about, the children of Woolpit. But we all know they were basically carbonated because the children of Woolpit, they come from a geographical landmass of the subterranean kingdom when you're talking about the city of Shambhala in Argartha, which is also known as the land of Neb or the land of Nebugen. In the land of Nebugen, you had a lot of gnomes, goblins, leprechauns, all these things that actually took place in the caverns of the earth when you're talking about Hollow Earth. So this gives you right here, they showing their veneration and they're paying homage to the children of Woolpit. And it shows you right here the village sign depicting the two green children of Woolpit erected in 1977. So, like I said, you could say it's a conspiracy. You could say it's basically something that is based, you could say it's basically something metaphysical that's actually taking place. You could say many different things. And you also can see right here, this is in Woolpit. I'm not sure if they came from the caverns of this place right here. You can see that there is basically a ancient door inside the caverns that can possibly lead to Hollow Earth, right? And we all know that the Hollow Earth theory is basically real. It talks about it in many different publications of Dr. York. It's many different mythologies, legends that basically applies to everything that I'm basically talking about that's interconnected to Halloween and things of that nature. So, like I said, you had the goblins and things, gnomes or whatever. They were basically highly melanated people, right? Now, this is where we get into the factions. Hold on. Yeah, there were basically the goblins are basically the counterparts of banshees, leprechauns, fairies, brownies. Pixies were evil spirits which were once thought to emerge on the festival of Samhain and later called Halloween. The name Mormon means specter, goblin, ghoul, spook, or orc, which is why when you watch the movie Shrek, Shrek is green. So all these synchronicities is there's an alignment there. These were highly melanated people that the melanin was so concentrated that they turned green. That's because they had magnesium-based blood. Because one thing you got to understand about magnesium-based blood, it doesn't break down intrinsically, just like when you have brown skin, right? Because the reason why the great majority of black people have brown skin is because it's based on a form of oxidation. Because when you breathe in oxygen, it steals electrons from the hemoglobin, and that's when the aging process starts to come into play, to where you get the activation of certain red blood cells, which also applies to the frequency of the epidermis layer of your skin starts to turn brown or copper colored, right? So the name goblin is derived from the French language, little people, fairy tale. So that all applies to this. Like Leprechaun was a so-called Negro, right? When you watch the movie Leprechaun, because he wanted the gold, he was dripped up in gold, all this stuff. There's a synchronicity there. So now this is where we get into the Canaanite black nobility vampires, right? Because one thing you got to understand about these myths and legends, when you're talking about Frankenstein, you're talking about witches, warlocks, goblins, leprechauns, and things of that nature, there's a beginning point where all these stories came from. Because what you got to understand is that Dracula is a Draconian. Draconians come from the Draconian star constellation that propagate Draconian law. Draconian law is ecclesiastical law. Ecclesiastical law is maritime law. Maritime law was cultivated by the black nobility archons of what you call a blackamoor, right? Who stole the land by way of the religion that's connected to, many different factions of the hedonistic culture of Westernized civilization, right? So the first Canaanites were actually your so-called blacks. Your first Amorites was your first so-called blacks. But by way of genetic splicing during the process in 4086 BC on the island of Patmos, these black Draconians, over time, they started to break down the genetical structure and create other forms of demographics of people that had recessive genetical traits. So this is what you're looking at is the human form of a Dracula, but his real form is actually a draconian reptilian, right? We finna get into it. Now, the vampire in legends, vampire or Dracula is again a product of ancient myths and legends. Look at this V vampire. Dracula means son of Drac. Drac is a Draco. Drago is Drago, the name of the species of a reptilian constellation called Dracos, which is the shape of a dragon and the letter Zeta in Greek, right? So one thing you gotta understand, they show you all these movies about Dracula and Draconians or whatever. But the first ones they show you in Vampire in Brooklyn. They talk about the inception point of the story on how these vampires that is connected to the cherubim or the 200 fallen angels, they were basically nomads, right? When you break down the etymological roots of the word nomad, it means the land of Nod. The land of Nod is Saturn. So these black nobility archons, these Canaanites, the first ones, were actually Saturnians. These are the same Saturnians that Norman Bergam seen when he said that they was getting off a spaceship and they were basically 7 to 8 feet tall, right? These is connected to the factions of that dark priesthood of the Luciferian Anunnaki or Draconian Reptilian. Because like I said, you have Anunnaki Draconian Reptilian as well, the negative factions of it, right? So as you can see right here in figure 16, you see a gargoyle. Now, when you study the neoclassical art and the sculptures of, Catholicism and all these cathedrals or whatever, you always see a gargoyle, right? A gargoyle is basically a gatekeeper of a certain genetical, it's a gatekeeper of a certain geographical landmass, because one thing you got to understand about churches and cathedrals, they're basically built on certain ley lines of the planet to block out energy. So they have on certain churches, they show you gargoyles, which are basically a derivative of draconians, right? As you can see. Not a coincidence. So one thing you got to understand is that discernment is key. You got to be able to decipher the information. The information is out there because you got to look at the garments. You got to look at the garments of what they was wearing back during the time period when they basically subjugated the indigenous people, right? Because when you look at the garments of these black nobility, archonic, draconian vampires, right? When you look at the garments, when you look at their clothing, they're basically in alignment to the same individuals in this photo right here, basically trying to subjugate the land from the indigenous people, right? So that is basically your diametrical difference between the chosen ones, the indigenous people, and the black nobility. So everybody on the right is following the factions of, oh, you got to go out and vote, you got to go to church and things of that nature. Everybody on the left is sitting here telling you, hey, we got to get the land back. We don't want reparations. We got to disconnect from the system. We got to galvanize the 144,000. This on the right, everybody over here is telling you, vote, vote, vote. They want you to be applied to the system because those are basically the personifications of the sellouts that sold us out into the system under ecclesiastical law, because the church and the state is not separate. They work in tandem by way of canon laws, because the canon laws is connected to the black Christian codes. It was implemented by the Inquisition. All this stuff works in conjunction. So your black nobility right here on the right are basically the personification of these individuals right here. When you look at the garments, you got to pay attention to the signs. The indigenous people, we didn't wear buckled shoes and button-up shirts. We wore moccasins, right? We wore moccasins. We wore buffalo skin clothing or whatever. We wore feathers. We didn't wear hats. You know what I'm saying? We wore, turbans and things of that nature. So this is where it's basically in alignment to all that. Now this is where we get into werewolf, or whatever you want to call it. Werewolf, the beast man, because a werewolf is also part of the same factions of the Shaggy, which is also another word for Bigfoot, right? And we finna get into that as we get through the presentation. So stick around. You got to stick around for the video, because this the video I'm going to show you is going to blow your wig back. It's about a guy who had an interaction with a certain entity, and I'm gonna show the video later. So one thing you gotta understand is about supernatural folklore. I'm gonna show you this video for a second first. Now notice I showed you the werewolf, because as I was telling you before, whether these creatures exist or not, you can still create them, right? You can say extraterrestrials don't exist, but they can make them. They have the technology. You seeing robots walking around, you know what I'm saying, jumping up and dancing, talking to you, you know, all this stuff. Artificial intelligence denotes the fact that they have the technology to manipulate certain genetics to create extraterrestrials, to create creatures, monsters. They have that stuff in their labs. They have that stuff, you know, in certain places that you, certain governmental places that you don't see. So it's not about believing, oh, I don't believe that. They have the technology. They have the specimens to do what they want to do when it comes to creating whatever they want to create. So that basically is an alignment when you go to the book of Revelations, and how it's going to be strange beasts walking up on the surface, right? So like I said, whether if they're coming from a different dimensional reality, or if they're being created and then, you know, brought to the surface of the planet, it doesn't matter. These things exist, whether they're created or they're coming from a different dimensional realm. They exist, point blank, period. Because why? Because they have the technology, right? So that applies to the folklore and the supernatural phenomenon. So what you're looking at right here, these are all the places where you have cryptids. Cryptids is another nomenclature title for a creature or a monster. So these cryptids, they live inside the caverns of the planet. When you're talking about Nightmare Hall or whatever, and a lot of these cryptids are basically your personification of fallen angels or your cherubim, and they're going to come to the surface in a big ritualistic sacrifice event when you have the blackout, right? As I was talking about in my last transmission. So I'm going to show you this video for a second.
They said a man was attacked by a bear.
Let me play it back.
They said a man was attacked by a bear.
Now, you and I both know that ain't no damn bear. That's something else. Look at the claws on the car, on the truck, right?
Dang. Y'all know what that means, right? When he got attacked by that bear, I think that was his something.
So, like I said, whether you believe it or not, these entities exist. They exist. It's either, you know what I'm saying, they're being created, or they're really coming from a different dimensional reality, coming from different portals and things of that nature, right? So now this is where we get into I'm glad you guys stayed for the video. This is where we get into the video. So get your popcorn. It's about a guy he had a certain interaction with a metaphysical entity. And I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm going to let it play all the way through. So get your popcorn, share this video. If you're new to the channel, we got about 50 to 60% of the people who watch the channel that are not subscribed. So subscribe to the channel, get this video out there that, for those who don't understand the occultic science and the metaphysical information talking about Halloween and how Halloween is basically interconnected to ritualistic events that basically lines up with the election. So, and it also plays a part of, many different creatures, but this video plays a big part of it because it's applied to everything that I'm basically talking about when you're talking about cryptids and things of that nature.
Hey, he started talking like one of us. This dude just was like, man, I'm just tired. I'm like, what you tired of? He was like, I'm sick of these people chasing us, looking for us.
This guy's basically talking about how he had an encounter with a Bigfoot, right? He's talking about his encounter with a Bigfoot. Share this video. Share this video.
Hey, he started talking like one of us. This dude just was like, man, I'm just tired. I'm like, what you tired of? He was like, I'm sick of these people chasing us, looking for us. We see them setting up their cameras. They act like we don't see them setting up their trail cameras and all that. I'm like, man, I feel you. He was like, one day we're just going to snatch somebody up. I was like, dude, I can't wait to see that at one of these shows. I'm just saying. Then he started talking about how he was created in a lab. The scientist that created him looked just like me. He was like, all the other races and all that is his brothers and sisters, and they was all created after him. The Chinese people was created before the white man was created, and they was created last. And I was just like, what the? Bro, what are you talking about? And he was just like, the people that look like you, they not you.
Boom. He said the people who look like you, they are not you, because the negative factions of the Anunnaki, the Luciferian Anunnaki, when you're talking to black nobility, the ones on the right in ancient times are the ones who created these entities, right? These what you're talking about, these are archonic forces in physical form. This is their real form, the Draconian reptilian. So when he said that they look like us, but they're not us, this is what he's basically talking about. They look like me and you. These are the scientists that are basically genetically splice everything into existence, right? When you're talking about Bigfoot, werewolf, things of that nature, all this stuff is applied to it. And mind you, also just for for clarity purposes, and to give a frame of reference, I talked to this guy on the phone, and I asked him if he was trolling, and he was like, "Nah, this is something that I experienced and I shared it with the world." And I asked him, I said, "You mind if I share this on my YouTube channel?" And he was cool with it or whatever. So, take this as you will or whatever. Take it with a grain of salt or whatever, or just get the edification from
it. Like, just beware. And then he just walked off. And about. And he was just like, the people that look like you, they not you. He was like, just beware. And then he just walked off. So basically, I was just chilling when the Bigfoot walked up to me. You know what I'm saying? And so he walks off, and it was like he wanted me to follow him. So he was like, dude, I'm going to show you something. He was like, but you can never bring nobody here. And he touched the tree, and the tree opened. He touched the tree, and the tree opened. We went inside the tree. It was a whole village of Bigfoots, baby Bigfoots, female Bigfoots. I'm talking about massive Bigfoots. It was like some Wakanda stuff. It's there, but you don't even know that it's there. I'm seeing all kind of stuff. Hey, these are not just, you think they're just some creatures or whatever the situation may be. These beings are heavenly advanced. Okay. They were the first to be created. They were too big, they were too strong. So they needed to slim them down. And that's when they started creating humans. This is what this dude is telling me. He was like, we've seen the anger of man at its finest. That's why we always just, we in and out. Because we know what they want to do to us. And they don't even know that we are their brothers, basically. I'm like, but how did y'all learn English? So basically what dude was telling me, he was like, we can summon portals at will. So when we go through the portal, and like I said, it looked like some type of little village or something. And he said it was something, but then it was like, just come on, just follow me. So he summoned another portal, and we went through it. And it opened up to a whole new world. It was pyramids. It was cities. They had levitating cars. Like everything we do over here, they was doing over there. They're just Bigfoots. I'm like, what the heck is going on? He was like, and when like people smell that just the funkiest smell ever, he was like, that's some type of tactic they do to get you to be like, oh, you about to, then you get away, And I'm like, man, because when we got over there, then none of these Bigfoot stink. I didn't smell nothing. It was beautiful over there. And he was like, man, come with me over here. So we go to his homie's house. First of all, they got neighborhoods like we got neighborhoods. We go inside of his homie's house, and his house is set up like our houses would be set up over here. They watching TV. And I'm like, hold on. That looked like something I would watch. And I'm like, what are you watching? He was like, y'all. So after I get done noticing they watching us on TV, we started chopping it up, and then we stepped outside. Dude has a beautiful scenery of everything, right? So he started telling me about the black man trapped in America. He was like, let me tell you something. He was like, they are not Africans. They are not of this place. He was like, they are the ancient fallen ones, the chaos beings. He was like, the scientists, those who look like you that created me, it was genetically impossible for them to clone themselves. So they moved to the Caucasus Mountains and started experimenting with creation. He was like, I was created first. Like I said in my other video, they were too big, they were too strong. So they started experimenting with canines and monkeys and all this stuff. And that's how you started getting all these different races. And I'm like, what the heck? He was like, you ever notice you hear all these Bigfoot stories in all these different states and places and stuff? Like, because they were there first. He was like, once those who were created last came about, which they were in the Caucasus Mountains, when they were found, he was like, they were in the Caucasus Mountains and they were walking on all four. They were eating each other. They were sleeping with each other, all kind of crazy stuff. And he was like, the Moors taught them everything they know, taught them how to brush their teeth, wash their, take a bath and all this stuff like this. And he was like, and then they got so much of the knowledge, then they turned their backs on their creators, basically, or whatever. And I'm just like, man, this is some way out stuff. He was like, yeah. So we just sit back and watch. He was like, there's a war coming, and we wanted to bring you here to get you up to speed. And I'm like, he was like, you don't remember who you are, but we about to show you. And he summoned this portal. And he was like, go remember. And I'm just like, this is crazy. So we enter the portal. He's like, the science over here is in reverse, and it's beautiful. It's like a purple black. And we walk in, chopping it up, and then this opening happens. Hey, I saw floating cities, floating pyramids. I saw people. They was green, red, and yellow. He was like, now you see why they call black people colored people. He was like, the oxygen in that world is rusting you guys out, making you guys look like rusty nails. I was like, what the heck? This is what this Bigfoot is telling me. And he was like, the copper man in the new world was created as a joke. He's like, you guys are titans trapped in human form. He was like, well, that's a whole nother story. I'm like, what the heck? So he was like, come here. He was like, he took me into this room, and there was this big old statue. I'm talking about a big statue. It's like this big old dude sitting down. And he was like, that's you. He was like, you are asleep right now. This is the form that you will take when you awake. So we in this room with this big old statue. This Bigfoot pretty much got me tripped out. He was like, this room is called the pineal glands. I seen all kind of treasures in there and everything, and the room was dark, like super dark. But the way the lighting is, you can see. And he was like, let's go down here and meet your people, and it just gets even more crazier. It's like we're inside of the universe. It's water. It's floating cities, and these floating cities are actual universes. Floating pyramids, these are actual universes with other gods and other entities and other people and other things going on. And I'm just like, what? I started meeting these people that I was seeing. And one of them was like amorphous. And I'm like, huh? It was like amorphous, the shapeless dragon face. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Man. So the one who was calling me amorphous, this shapeless dragon face, comes from the shadows. It's this big old 5-headed dragon. It was the great dragon mother Tiamat. And all she said was, you belong to me. And then left. The green dude was like, it was something you missed in the pineal glands room. We go back. He was like, did you have a chance to look up? And I looked up, and it was like a gold ceiling. And he was like, that's the physical brain sitting on top of the pineal glands. The physical brain is your enemy. The physical brain is what got you thinking that you are human, that you are human. The physical brain blocks the pineal glands from working properly. He was like, you are God, generator, operator, destroyer. And I'm just like, wow. And the Bigfoots was like, dude, listen. They was like, listen. I'm like, and it was like, you are God. They've trained you to forget who you are because they fear who you are. You are not like them. They don't like you because you understand that you don't belong there. And I'm just like, dude, are you in my head? Like, how do you know that I know these things already and I understand these things already? Hey, come to find out, we was in my head the whole time. The Bigfoot took me on a journey to deep inside my subconscious. Didn't even know. And then I woke up, or like, snapped to, and I was standing in front of the tree.
Now remember, he said that the brain is the enemy, because I was telling you before, in Kemetic spirituality, they used to do this thing called transnasal craniotomy, where they extract the brain through the nose. Because right before you go into the halls of Amenti and you about to go through, the dark gates or whatever, in order to break the spell of reincarnation, reincarnation is acclimated to your brain. The brain is what keeps you to the planet. And that's why they weigh the heart on the scales of my yacht and not the brain. The heart is the seat of the soul. So, give a brief rundown real quick. So this transmission was basically giving you the reality and the occultic knowledge about Halloween, which is another nomenclature title for Sam Hain. Sam is actually Samael. Samael is a Biblis. A Biblis is actually the fallen one. The fallen one is connected to the cherubim of the Anunnaki, the Luciferian Anunnaki, because Ibiblis, his father raped his way into the bloodline when you're talking about Malita, right? That's how the Draconian Reptilian became a part of the faction of the Anunnaki as far as the fallen ones. So that is basically when you break down the etymology of certain verbiage or whatever, you can get to the beginning points of where that came from. So Halloween is actually connected to Celtic culture. The Celts were Druids. The Druids are Amorites. Amorites are Canaanites. And according to Leviticus chapter 14, verse 33, right, they were basically practicing ritualistic sacrifices on Hallows Eve, right? So that's why everything that's connected to the deep state shadow government is based on witchcraft. This is why you see all this stuff that's going on. So this is just a brief rundown of what I'm showing you. A brief rundown. It all applies to the KKK, ritualistic sacrifices, and things of that nature. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. I hope this video gave you the clarity that you need in order to get the edification to understand the beginning and the inception points of where Halloween came from and how it's applied to politics, how it's applied to voting in the election, how it's applied to cryptids and leprechauns, ghouls and goblins and vampires, the black nobility, the Anunnaki. All this stuff works in symbiotic connection. Everything is connected. So like I said, the synchronicities are starting to sync. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.